Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
Shipping execution, meeting a delivery expectation, having a great delivery experience, particularly on international shipment, is a huge driver of whether or not that first-time buyer becomes a repeat buyer and then ultimately becomes part of your subscription program. And now you're really in the good place in terms of creating lifetime value and good economics in your business.
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation, coming to you from Shoptalk 2024 at Mandalay Bay in Vegas. Excited to be joined with Tom Griffin, president of Passport. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Passport shipping, right?
Passport or passport shipping. I'll answer to either one.
Okay.
I answer to both, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not picky.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to spend the next half hour or so talking about Shoptalk and cross-border shipping and all kinds of great topics.
I love it.
Love it.
Love it.
As a way of getting started, Tom, would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I have been in the e-commerce industry a little over 20 years, actually, which by e-commerce standards is a long, long time.
Yes.
Started actually at a logistics software provider called Yantra. We were originally a WMS company, ultimately built out the industry's first distributed order management product, sold to a lot of large retailers. That company was acquired by Sterling Commerce. People may still know it as like the IBM Sterling Commerce OMS. Then I joined e-com platform company Demandware in 2006, was part of the early team there that helped take Demandware through IPO and really become an industry-leading SaaS e-com platform before Shopify, and ultimately acquisition by Salesforce and build out of the Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and had a couple-year hiatus from e-commerce where I was working in payments, but now I'm back and couldn't be happier to be back in the e-commerce ecosystem.
Wow. And so it seems like now, compared to everything else in the past, seemed very, you're still asset light, but it was still not in the logistics execution side of the business. It was more to do with, I would say, Yantra's more like orchestration, right? Back in the days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a little bit, right? Although for me, I think I always had this, having come originally from supply chain or what people would euphemistically refer to as the back end, right?
Yep.
And I would tell people when I was in the e-com platform side, they were like, how's this different? And I'd say, it's nice that people don't call me a back end anymore. But still, when you're on the front end, when you're on the e-com platform, it's really common. People forget that there's like all of this complexity around order fulfillment, inventory, how you're actually going to get the product there, right? Which is an incredibly important part of the value proposition of a brand, right? And customer perception of them. And being the person who'd come from that end of the business, I always had an affinity for it. As an example, one of the things I did there was I built out partnerships with 3PLs who wanted to create what at the time were called end-to-end e-commerce offerings, a full solution from e-com platform through order management, fulfillment, shipping, customer service. So I always had this affinity, I think, for where e-com and the merchant meets the back end, if you will. So Passport is a really great opportunity for me to work in both spheres, right?
Something that reminds me of is when you mentioned build partnership with 3PLs from like that Yantra Sterling days, like there were a few of those 3PLs out there that were doing the end-to-end, the fraud, the orchestration, the web management before all of the Shopify and whatnot took over. And you see those companies, even today, most of them exist in different names. I know who you're talking about from Sterling inside the hood. Do you see that industry kind of like went away where 3PLs and their OMS use versus like how it has become today? Like we don't see the same type of use case anymore. And what happened?
It's a great question, right? Yeah. My opinion, you're right. This goes back a ways. So think like 2007, 2008. And that's actually when I was early days at Demandware. And we were selling our core customer, our best customer was a brand. Right, not a traditional store-based retailer, because particularly back then, their mentality was still, I got to build it all. Yeah. Huge IT teams, a proclivity for building, hosting, managing. These terms sound foreign to people who are newer to the industry, but you guys know. And we would go and approach these brands and talk to them, and they would say, yeah, love what you're doing, but I just need to outsource this whole thing. I don't know how to ship a unit of one. All I know how to do is ship pallets to the back of my retail distribution. They were wholesalers still primarily, right? They didn't have a customer service function. They could talk to a customer or take an order. They didn't have an order management system for retail or for direct to consumer. And there were a group of people, outsourcers. One of them, for instance, was a company called GSI. They're not around anymore.
They're
now Radial.
Exactly. They're still Radial, but
sure,
I mean,
but they're not doing the full service thing. But that was a popular offering at the time. And we partnered with 3PLs that wanted to offer a similar full service capability because that's how these brands, a lot of them wanted to buy.
Exactly.
They weren't set up to put the pieces together themselves, and they didn't want to. And there was probably a couple reasons for that. I think one of the reasons was still back then, they perceived this as a channel. And for many of them, not even that strategic of a channel. And, a lot of things changed. Financial crisis in 2008 was one of the drivers. They were looking for growth. This was one of the places they could get growth. But I think even more importantly, at a macro level, at some point, everybody realized digital engagement with their consumer was their business. And if they didn't own that and control that and want to drive it and not outsource it, they were making a mistake. And I think that's where you saw the sort of fading away of that outsourced model with all of the brands bringing that in-house, for lack of a better way to describe it, and wanted to manage and control it. And even if you're still shipping through a 3PL, which like today, almost all of our customers are, you're not outsourcing your whole direct-to-consumer operation.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. It looks very different today. Again, so there is still the Radials around and PFS who kind of like that's where the roots go back to, that type of execution and operation. You just brought up like there is that eBay GSI mafia, right? There are people that graduated out of that whole ecosystem that have gone on to become leaders in this space in so many places. I'm guessing you were there, right, at that time?
I was there. There's a Demandware mafia. There's a lot of these companies that have their mafias.
Exactly.
I think at the end of the day, what matters the most is how does a customer want to buy,
right?
3PLs are still incredibly important part of the value chain. I just think that customers no longer are looking for those entities to deliver a complete full service offering. And we see the same thing in cross-border, actually.
Really?
Yeah. That today there's a number of people who want to solve that problem as an outsourcer, or the term you might hear is merchant of record model. And I think it's similar to what we were talking about a minute ago. It's because the customer views this as either hard, and I'm not set up to do this myself, or not strategic yet, or some combination of both. Oh, fine, I'll outsource this. And my belief is there's a better way to do this where you don't have to outsource everything.
Very interesting.
I think that's exactly where we want to go, Tom. I think, too, a lot of brands and retailers, they generally feel when they're starting that the pool of revenue opportunities within North America is a pretty big pot, right? So they start here, and we've been having conversations here at Shoptalk where it's now that, thank God, 2023 is behind everybody, and 24, it's all about revenue, new areas of growth opportunity. And international is still one of those segments of the market that people just are, maybe it's fear of the unknown or the complexity of it. They just don't feel they're ready for it. So I'd love your perspective of how a brand could actually expand across the pond. And what does that look like? And what are some of the complexities probably that are existing?
Sure, multiple ponds potentially, but
yes, exactly.
So there was a lot there. Let me try to unpack that in a couple pieces. We all remember when double-digit year-over-year growth was just basically what you got for your boat rising in the tide of e-commerce growth at 12, 13, 14%. We're not in that world anymore. We had the COVID blip, but now things, I think, have settled back down into that single-digit world. And it's expensive in the U.S., so a lot of these brands will get to a point pretty quickly where, although they're still growing, they're not growing as fast domestically. It can be expensive to acquire that next customer. And if you think about just what people might perceive as the easy countries, right? Canada, UK, EU, Australia, New Zealand, right? And we'll talk later about how, yes, they're easy, but maybe not, right? You've now more than doubled your addressable market of consumers that probably have a really nice fit to the ICP of your brand or product. And you're talking about markets with a high rate of digital adoption and e-commerce spend. And oh, by the way, the customer acquisition cost is lower in a lot of those markets. Now, let me actually qualify that. The traffic acquisition cost can be a lot lower in those markets. I think where brands can struggle sometimes is converting that traffic, and they might be converting at a much lower rate, and therefore they don't recognize or realize the lower customer acquisition cost opportunity or the kind of lower life TAC to LTV opportunity in those markets. But it's there and it's available. And I think for a lot of people, they just perceive this as hard. And the great thing about e-commerce, and as I mentioned, I took a couple of year hiatus and I was working in some other industries, and I'm back, and I'm Shoptalk, such this amazing experience. I probably had 100 conversations catching up with people. 90% of them are about growth.
Okay.
And I think we're spoiled in this industry, right? That it's all about growth, right? And when you're out in other places, and so many more of the conversations are about cost reduction and operational efficiency. And look, those things are important. Those conversations happen here and they happen in e-commerce. They're realities, but still, the focus is on growth. And e-commerce merchants frequently are almost all the ones I've ever spoken to. On any given day, they have 27 really good idea things they could do with a positive ROI. And they've got time, resource, and budget for 9 of them, right? And I've found that if there's one thing that you can do to help them, it's to help them go from like 9 things they can do to 15. Right?
Exactly.
By saving them time and effort and making something that they perceived as complex, simple, or in reality was complex, and making it simple. And I think that's where international is, right? It's something that for a lot of them they may perceive as complex, but it doesn't have to be.
That makes a lot of sense.
Some of what we've seen in the market is a brand called in the US actually then finding a 3PL called in the UK or somewhere to expand. And the difficulty there is, you don't know exactly what SKUs or what bundles or what the adoption is going to look like. And you have to make that investment in getting physical stock in country. And if you don't get that, it's super expensive. The conversations we've had, we've seen a lot more adoption to a Passport-like solution where I could actually have the breadth of my SKUs available globally without having to do that in-country placement. So is that a type of conversation that you have with brands?
Sure, absolutely. Now, I think a simplistic view of it is, basically it's 2 lines. One line is my inventory costs, which I know are going to go up, right? If I want to locate inventory there. And the other is my shipping costs. And they're thinking, where are these lines going to cross? And at that point, I'll put inventory somewhere else, right? And although inevitably there are for a lot of brands at some scale, the economics and those lines will cross, right? When it would make sense to locate inventory in other regions. It's not about the inventory cost. That's part of the equation. But when you set up and are now fulfilling from other countries, you're opening yourself up to an enormous amount of additional complexity and cost. Things like you're now importing those products into that country and you're paying duties on the import into that country. You may be subject to different regulatory requirements, different labeling requirements, different language requirements, different tax requirements.
Right.
So again, at some point, at some scale, I think it's inevitable that it might make sense to do, but it's way more than just the inventory carrying cost should be part of that equation.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
You mentioned earlier LTV. So I am curious, I'd love your perspective on the customer experience expectations when someone is buying product from a company in North America, and let's just say they're in the UK, that transit time, so the delivery, what are those expectations that are aligned? Because obviously LTV is really important to get purchase number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Right. And a lot of our customers and a lot of brands, and there's been a macro level shift, particularly with the proliferation of health and beauty brands, their business model has an increased importance around subscription, right? And creating lifetime value of customer, getting them into a subscription model. And as you guys know, shipping execution, meeting a delivery expectation, having a great delivery experience, particularly on international shipment, is a huge driver of whether or not that first-time buyer becomes a repeat buyer and then ultimately becomes part of your subscription program. And now you're really in the good place in terms of creating lifetime value and good economics in your business compared to your customer acquisition cost. And I don't think the speed of that shipment is anywhere near as important as meeting the expectation you set. And I guess those are like rules for life we all know, right?
Like
Happiness
that.
is all about expectations.
Right.
Set the right expectations, someone will be happy. And most consumers, particularly what we've seen, UK, EU consumers, Australian consumers, and again, this will be a little bit of a parochial conversation if we're talking primarily about U.S. brands selling to rest of world. So
Exactly.
sorry if you're listening from one of those countries. I don't think you're international, I know. Right? You actually exist where you do.
Yeah.
So it's a little parochial. But what's way more important than whether it's 3 days or 5 days is you set the right expectation and then you meet or exceed that expectation in that experience. And the other thing that's critically important in the shopping experience is no surprises. Right? Surprises in checkout are the number one driver of abandoned shopping carts, right? Number two is typically lack of information, right? Where I have the confidence to buy. You use the UK example. I'm a UK consumer. I like your product. I put it in cart. I get to the checkout and, whoa, okay, what's this? You're charging me an extra 20% for VAT. I'm not used to that. I'm used to seeing that in the product price. That's a problem. And the reality is, even if you've done the smart thing and you've converted to local currencies, the good news is they're seeing that as an 80-pound product. Had they put the 96-pound product in cart and seen no VAT, they convert. They put the 80-pound product in cart and see 16 pounds of VAT. They're like, oh my God, I didn't expect that. Abandoned cart.
Yeah.
If you can't tell them when they're going to get it, if there's not complete clarity on the cost to ship, again, abandoned shopping carts.
Yep.
And this is where I think a lot of brands struggle, right? From either, are you presenting in local currency? Are you thinking about the conversion drivers, whether it's how they expect duty and tax to be presented to them? It's less about how long it may take, and we can get it there pretty quickly within most people's expectations. But is there a mystery as to when or how much that's going to cost? That's the killer.
That makes a ton of sense.
And maybe a little bit more about on the passport side, right? Cross-border shipping. Are there other parts of cross-border experience for merchants that you also engage in? Localization?
Sure. I like to there's an enormous number of things someone has to get right, right? If you were to build a project plan for going international, you'd probably come up with a couple of hundred tasks. But to simplify it, I think of it as in three main buckets or three legs of the stool, or things always seem to come in three in businesses, right? So the first is experience. And we just talked about some of this. Are you presenting the localized experience? So from the time that UK consumer arrives at your site, are you presenting them with a UK-specific landing page and personalizing and marketing to them there? Are you presenting products to them in pounds? Do you have duty and tax embedded so that when they get to the cart, they're not surprised? And then when they're getting to cart, are you giving them complete clarity on shipping costs? Maybe you've decided to subsidize shipping it again, embedded in the product price, so they're not out on margin, right? We all know free shipping converts best. Flat rate shipping probably converts second best. Live in cart third, right? But again, it varies by brand, right? It's all of these things that make up experience. That's bucket number one, right? Bucket number two is logistics and getting the product there, getting it there within the expected delivery time, providing complete visibility and transparency through the process. So if I want to check my order status, I can see where it is.
DDP, DDU, all of that being clarified,
right? That's the third category, which is compliance.
Okay.
And this is where these things work together. So compliance is about regulatory compliance, tax compliance. So simple example, DDU, DDP.
Yep. Could you explain that to the audience that might not know? Because this is where a lot of trouble starts for international.
Yeah, and actually, so UK is a great example. Let's break this down. Traditionally, people think of there being two options, DDU, DDP. Delivered duties unpaid, delivered duties paid. Basically, DDU means I think that you as the buyer are responsible for paying taxes, and I'm just going to send you this thing, and any sort of tax or duty obligations are on you, the buyer, right? Yep. And that's the more traditional way that I think a lot of e-commerce shipments went. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a huge migration to what I think is a much better experience in delivered duties paid, DDP, where the merchant is collecting and then remitting all of the taxes and duties. It's going to clear customs faster, and there's no surprise to the customer. Now, let's take the UK example. The UK and the EU both changed their laws in 2021, where you are responsible for the collection of VAT taxes and the remittance of those taxes to the appropriate taxing authority, to the UK or the EU. So there is no real concept of DDU. DDU is a shipping method. It's who you may ship through. But you as the merchant are no longer able to think that you can just send things there and it's someone else's responsibility to collect and remit the taxes. It's your responsibility. And I talk to brands all the time, fortunately not our customers because we've already helped them sort this out.
But as a shipper, can you then act as the merchant of record and kind of help settle that? Rather than having the merchants manage that.
Okay. We actually call it seller of record, which is a little different. The merchant of record model is an outsourced model.
Okay.
Where you're basically saying, I can't deal with this. You guys over there, you run my international business for me. You be the merchant of record.
Right.
Is an enablement model.
Okay.
Where it's still your site. It's still sense. Your checkout. It's still your customer. You're still capturing first-party data, which you're not in the outsourced model. It's your brand. You don't have a disjointed brand experience between an international shopper and a domestic shopper. You don't have to know the rules. You don't have to run around the world creating tax IDs.
So from an experience perspective, though, can you also then think about rolling up the cost or the duties into the price of the product being displayed?
Yeah, and for a lot of markets, that's absolutely how you should do it because that's the way the consumers used to seeing it.
Right.
And when you get to cart and there's this unexpected line item, that's a cart abandonment issue,
exactly.
Right? Or surprise is always bad, right? When you get to the cart. So it's really common. What you're referring to is a term called pricing coefficients. Right. So a pricing coefficient is not just the currency conversion from dollars to pounds, but it's all the other things you're going to want to do to then ultimately get to the price you want to display to the consumer in that local currency, which can include embedding duty and tax.
Right.
If you want to offer free shipping and say, but I'm going to add X amount of money to the product. That way you're able to provide free shipping, but you're not impacting your margins if you want to do that. And these technologies and tools are now way more available than they used to be. And this is where the barriers, although there's all the same challenges, if you will, but the barriers to solving them have come way down. I mean, so what used to be like complex technology that an outsourcer had to bring to you, it's just available to you in your e-com platform.
Right.
And with a little bit of expertise, you can figure out how to dramatically improve your international experience, but also how to decide where you want to be on that sort of margin profitability curve.
Right.
And then have that all displayed in local currency the way the consumer wants it.
So you've done an amazing job, both you gentlemen, unpacking a lot of the nuances that go on. But was wondering if you could, for someone who's just looking to explore this for the first time, any advice you could give? What should they be thinking about? Or what advice do you give to it could be a mid-market brand, enterprise brand, anyone who's not shipping internationally as they're going to get started on this journey?
Sure. Thinking a little more broadly, it's a huge market opportunity. That's sort of undeniable. Just the Western countries, for lack of a better way to describe it, and I hate using that term. You've doubled your audience of people who have a really good fit to your product.
Yep.
Right? It's in many ways a lot easier than you think because of the proliferation of technologies, either things that are now embedded into the e-com platforms or other third-party technologies to do this. So if it's a huge opportunity, but it's lower on your list because you think it's harder and there's a lot of easier stuff to do, it may not be.
Right.
But still, work with a partner, particularly somebody who does understand and can help you is all the key areas, because it doesn't help if you can ship the product there, but your conversion's horrible, right? It doesn't help if your conversion, you've figured out all the stuff in cart, but your delivery stinks, and therefore you never get a repeat purchase. Right. And in particular around compliance, this is where there's still a lot of complexity and country-specific rules and regulatory requirements that you really will benefit from a partner that can help you figure these things out. But I think the big difference now is you don't have to outsource the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And that's almost where we started the conversation.
Exactly.
Is that evolution that happened in e-commerce a lot of years ago. I think in international, we're going through that same evolution where people had been outsourcing and now they just don't have to. And international can and should be something that's a strategic part of your business, a high double-digit growth driver for you. And it's probably a lot easier than you think to do it right.
Exactly. And there are other aspects as well. Language, right? The payment options that you provide in each country, it's going to look a little different. Visa and MasterCard's not going to cut it in a lot of countries, right? So what are the choices that you are making available? This subject goes so deep. Within a short amount of time, you're pretty much given one of the most clear, concise classes for a new brand to be able to figure out how do they do this? How do they go international, the pitfalls, what you should be thinking about. So
I appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. We've scratched the surface. So,
we have, yes.
That's right.
It's a complex topic.
Yes.
A teaser. Yep. And for those that want to learn a little bit more, Tom, where can they go to follow you on social media? Again, it's Passport and Passport Shipping.
Sure. But I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect. Tom Griffin. PassportShipping.com, great places to find more information. It is the shipping, and it's all the compliance expertise and tax management for you. So you don't have to become an expert in either regulatory or tax compliance.
Thank you very much. This has been a phenomenal episode.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Yeah. And really time flew.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Ninad Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Fulfillment IQ, and I'm here with
Dan Call, CRO and partner at Fulfillment IQ. We're the team behind the eCom Logistics podcast. Our mission is to provide you with genuine insights from our work alongside logistics leaders to help you improve your supply chain.
In the eCom Logistics podcast, we share the knowledge and the insights we've gained from working alongside amazing brands, retailers, 3PLs, and VCs, so you can make the most out of your supply chain journey.
If you like what you're hearing, we'd truly appreciate your support with a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting channel. Your feedback not only keeps us going, but also helps others find the podcast. If you think Fulfillment IQ can assist you, or if you have an idea related to logistics, just reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're always up for a chat and ready to explore new possibilities together.
Stay tuned to the eCom Logistics podcast on your favorite podcast platform for fresh and practical insights into e-commerce and logistics. Until next time, let's keep making a difference.